In the news tonight, His Majesty the King urges full cooperation between government and lower house in line with the Constitution to improve economic conditions and alleviate citizens' financial burdens. Haider al-Abadi announces the start of an offensive in the northern city of Mosul to dislodge Daesh and put an end to the group's ambitions for territorial rule in Iraq. And IDEX, the region's largest defense expo, opens in Abu Dhabi with over 1,200 defense firms from 57 countries taking part. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. His Majesty King Abdullah urged full cooperation between the government and the lower house in line with the Constitution, which defines the mandate of the executive and legislative branches. He told heads of parliamentary blocs in a meeting at Al Husseiniya Palace in the presence of the Prime Minister and the House Speaker that this relationship should be based on positive partnership and cooperation. His Majesty said this cooperation would enable the country to improve economic conditions and alleviate citizens' financial burdens, adding that all Jordanians are in the same boat in these difficult conditions, urging full focus on economic priorities. King Abdullah urged higher legislative performance and team spirit to resolve economic issues, but to place the interests of the people above any other consideration through combating poverty and unemployment. His Majesty vowed zero tolerance against any attempt by individuals or groups to hinder national efforts towards progress and advancement. On national concerns, His Majesty assured the meeting that he is fully satisfied with the security situation in the country. His Majesty also addressed his recent visit to the United States and Russia, as well as the kingdom's preparations to convene the Arab Summit in March, in addition to regional issues, namely ongoing efforts to relaunch Palestinian-Israeli peace talks, reach a political solution in Syria and support a national reconciliation in Iraq. Prime Minister Hani al-Mulki reaffirmed his government's intent to take steps to protect low and middle-income groups and work towards a more investor-friendly legislation in a bid to create jobs. Separately, His Majesty welcomed a U.S. congressional delegation at Al Husseiniya Palace and discussed with them Jordanian-U.S. ties and ongoing international developments, namely the situation in Syria and Iraq. Leading the congressional delegation is Senator Roger Wicker. His Majesty voiced appreciation of U.S. support to Jordan as it deals with the repercussions of the Syria crisis. The talks also dealt with efforts to relaunch serious and effective Palestinian-Israeli negotiations based on a two-state solution. The discussion also reviewed efforts to counter terrorism. Speaking to parliamentarians at a ceremony at Al Hussein Sports City, Senate President Faisal Al-Fayez acknowledged the difficult times and economic hardships the kingdom is facing, but said through His Majesty's leadership, the people's awareness and understanding of current challenges Jordan shall overcome. We are all for peaceful demonstrations and constructive critical rhetoric, Al-Fayez said, but we do not condone insults made against others. He said compassion and respect must define relations among Jordanians, and this is what preserves our national cohesion and unity, and urged for an active role in this respect by parliamentarians.
Despite all the challenges that Jordan is confronting, Jordanians are kind-hearted people. Our country is in good hands. I am optimistic about the future of our beloved kingdom. My dear brothers, Jordan is dealing with major challenges, and the situation is difficult. I do support protests and demonstrations, provided these protests remain peaceful. And I also support criticism, but it should be objective and constructive criticism without offending others.
The ceremony was organized by the Jordanian Parliamentary Club in celebration of the 18th anniversary of His Majesty's assumption of his constitutional powers. Al-Fayez hailed the excellent relations that exist between Jordan and Iraq, as well as with Gulf states, saying the Gulf has been a big supporter to the kingdom in the most dire conditions. Attending the ceremony were former and current MPs, including former House Speakers and Senate Presidents. The United Nations envoy to Syria says talks to be held starting the 23rd of this month in Geneva would aim to see if there was a window for political negotiations to advance. And that is why, he added, the UN is supporting the Astana process based on the assumption that the Astana talks between Turkey, Russia, Iran and Syrian factions aim at establishing, stabilizing and reinforcing the cessation of hostilities in Syria. If supported, de Mistura said the ceasefire agreed in Astana has more chances to succeed than others. On the other hand, he said the Geneva talks would be based on UN Security Council Resolution 2254, which speaks of ruling mechanisms in Syria, the new constitution and holding of elections. De Mistura was speaking in Germany at the Munich Security Conference.
Confidence building measures, which means, are we going to see all these three pillars of 2254 moving forward in Geneva? I can't tell you. And frankly, I, like the Secretary General, don't make myself illuded about it. What I do know, that we have to push for the momentum. Because even a ceasefire with two strong guarantors cannot hold too long if there is not a political horizon. If you want to defeat Daesh, we need, even if it looks complicated, even if it looks remote, a political, inclusive, credible solution in Syria. And that's the challenge that we are going to face in the next few weeks. Thank you.
Meanwhile, the warring sides in Syria continue to accuse each other of violating the ceasefire agreed in the Kazakh capital Astana, as renewed fighting was reported today in Hama and Dar'a. Addressing delegates at the security conference in Munich, Turkey's foreign minister and the Syrian National Coalition president insist the UN-sponsored talks in Geneva are the only place to discuss a political solution in Syria. The two sides say Astana has never been an alternative to Geneva.
Turkey insists Geneva is the only venue to discuss a political solution in Syria. The Turkish foreign minister says while the Astana talks are a good confidence-building measure, the UN-led Syria peace talks in Geneva are the only place to negotiate a political solution and transition. The minister, speaking at the Munich Security Conference, said the Astana process has never been an alternative to Geneva, and the Geneva talks must resume as the basis for a political solution.
But Astana has never been as an alternative to Geneva. Astana is a good confidence-building measure. Also, it was good to maintain the ceasefire, and it was a good step forward. So, therefore, we need to resume Geneva talks.
The Syrian opposition share the same opinion as Turkey, saying they are fully committed to peace talks in Geneva to pave the way for a political transition.
We will head to Geneva fully committed and prepared to negotiate a political solution which brings the conflict to an end and paves the way for a genuine, inclusive transition and the eradication of extremist groups.
Meanwhile, the US administration is still reviewing its position on Syria. According to Brett McGurk, the US envoy to the coalition against Daesh, he says the US is seeking a role to reinforce Russian and Turkish efforts to cement a ceasefire in the country.
Turkey and Russia are suitable guarantors, and we are looking for a role that the US can come in to help reinforce that process through Astana. Also, very much agree with what Stefan said. This is very important. The Astana process is about the mechanics of the ceasefire and making sure we continue to de-escalate the violence.
Meanwhile, much of western Syria is covered by ongoing but shaky ceasefire between the government and rebels that took effect on December 30. But fighting has continued on, with warring sides accusing each other of truce violations. Loy Bakar for the news at 10.
Iraqi Prime Minister Haidar al-Abadi announced that Iraqi troops have begun moving towards Daesh terrorist group in western Mosul, starting an offensive to retake the city. Iraqi planes dropped millions of leaflets on western Mosul, warning residents that the offensive was imminent. In an emotional televised speech, al-Abadi promised a soon-to-be liberation of the entire city of Mosul.
We are announcing the start of a new phase of We Are Coming in our operations to liberate the right side of Mosul city as we have liberated other areas. We call on our brave troops to start a push to liberate the rest of the city and to liberate people from the oppression and terrorism of Daesh. Our main mission is to liberate the people before liberating the land. You have done a great job by liberating other areas, by taking care of people, including the displaced people, and by providing services for them. We reiterate, as we said before, the importance of taking care of people and dealing with them in a humanitarian way, and providing all the necessary requirements for the displaced people, as you did before, you brave fighters.
As al-Abadi announced the start of the offensive to retake the western part of Mosul, Iraqi forces were reported advancing. Iraqi federal police units are leading a northward charge on the Mosul districts that lie west of the Tigris River, aiming to capture Mosul airport. Officials expect fierce resistance from Daesh in west of Mosul than in the east. Among other difficulties, the districts have narrower streets and the troops will have to clear buildings without the benefit of the tanks and Humvees they had used in eastern Mosul. Meanwhile, the violence continues with renewed suicide attacks by Daesh in Mosul. Today, 5 people were killed, including 3 Iraqi soldiers, in 2 suicide bombings in the eastern part of Mosul. The first attack targeted an army checkpoint, killing 3 soldiers, and the second a gathering of civilians in the commercial district known as My Fair Lady, killing 2. A dozen people were also wounded in the 2 attacks carried out by men wearing explosive vests. The bombers are suspected to have crossed into eastern Mosul from the western side. On the other side of Mosul, citizens of Erfele and El Houd are purging every last vestige of Daesh presence by demolishing homes that belong to the terrorist group and even digging up their graves. This video shows a crowd of residents gathered to watch the house of a former neighbor, a member of Daesh, be blown up. The neighbor, called Abu Maytham, had fled when Iraqi forces drove the terrorists from the area last year as they advanced north towards Mosul. Now that the eastern part of Mosul has been cleared, residents are acting in revenge. The bombs used to demolish Abu Maytham's home were made by Daesh and were designed to kill or maim Iraqi security forces, but have been dug up to be reused against the group. This Iraqi soldier, a victim of Daesh, tells his story.
I am a member of the Iraqi Army's Division 10. I fled my house with my family in September 2014 when Daesh entered the area. We went to Baghdad and from there to Kirkuk, where I rejoined my unit. My house was confiscated by Daesh after they saw a picture of me with security forces posted on Facebook.
Top defense companies from across the world converged in Abu Dhabi as part of the International Defense Exhibition and Conference IDEX 2017, which kicked off today. Over 1,200 defense firms from 57 countries are taking part in the 5-day biennial event. Big names in the global defense industry, including Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, Embraer, and Northrop Grumman, will showcase their latest technology and defense equipment. According to a study by consultancy IHS Janes, Middle East and North Africa defense spending, which fell last year almost 2% year-on-year because of low oil prices, is expected to rise 1.4% this year as countries face a number of conflicts. IDEX is the region's largest defense expo, with more than 100,000 visitors expected to attend. For weeks now, U.S. President Donald Trump has been focusing on attacking the media, accusing them of lying, misrepresenting, and reporting fake news. Returning to a campaign trail yesterday in Melbourne, Florida, Trump delivered yet another attack on the media, telling the crowd he wanted to speak to them without the filter of fake news. After listing his promises and touting his White House accomplishments, Trump made his argument on immigration and banning citizens of certain countries to travel to the U.S., referring to an incident in Sweden.
You look at what's happening in Germany. Here's the bottom line. We've got to keep our country safe. You look at what's happening. We've got to keep our country safe. You look at what's happening in Germany. You look at what's happening last night in Sweden. Sweden. Who would believe this? Sweden. They took in large numbers. They're having problems like they never thought possible.
And while he was talking of fake news, nothing had actually happened in Sweden last night. Today, the Swedish embassy in Washington asked the U.S. State Department for an explanation of Trump's comments, suggesting there had been some sort of security incident in Sweden. And though many Swedes were left baffled, they took on Twitter, mocking Trump's remark and using the hashtag last night in Sweden. The Flight of the Angel was the highlight of the Venice Carnival today that attracted thousands in St. Mark's Square. The crowds watched as a beauty pageant winner, dressed in carnival costume, descended from the bell tower of St. Mark's Basilica. At noon, the angel, dressed in a sumptuous gown, elegantly descended the rope from the bell tower, scattering confetti onto the crowds. The ceremony used to be called the Flight of the Turk and dates back to 5 centuries ago. The Carnevale de Venezia is among the oldest carnivals in the world. During the 18 days of festivities, the lagoon city fills with thousands of tourists from across Italy and the world. To London and Fashion Week, where British label House of Holland presented his Autumn-Winter 2017 creations, rodeo-inspired outfits, and a 15-piece Woody Woodpecker capsule collection. Designer Henry Holland presented cowboy shirt-like dresses with fringes, flared trousers, and plenty of colorful cowboy boots decorated with motifs such as stars and flames. Models walked the catwalk with bold prints and also motifs adorned denim, jumpers, and silk rodeo-inspired designs. Oversized velvet puffer jackets were paired over slinky embroidered evening dresses. The designer also showcased a new red, white, and blue on his brand's signature tartan, accessorizing their looks with shiny cowboy hats. The brand also unveiled a 15-piece Woody Woodpecker capsule collection of colorful jackets, tops, dresses, and denim influenced by the cartoon character. London Fashion Week runs until the 21st. Thomas Kammerlander won the individual natural track luge World Cup titles after victories in the final meeting of the season at Umhausen, Austria. The Austrian edged out Italy's Patrick Pignetter, who had dominated the event for the past 11 years. Third place went to Alex Gruber of Italy. The women's title went to Greta Pingera of Italy, who finished ahead of her compatriot Evelyn Lanthaler and Austria's Tina Unterberger. And in the doubles event, Russia's Pavel Porshnev and Ivan Lazarev won the title. Unlike artificial luge tracks, natural tracks are adapted from existing mountain roads and paths naturally iced. In order to drive around the tight, flat corners, athletes use a steering rein, drag their hands, and use their legs.
Jetzt kommen natürlich unsere Fotografen noch einmal zu ihrem Recht.
Australia's Scotty James and Kelly Clark of the US claimed victory at the season's final snowboard halfpipe World Cup meeting in Pyeongchang, South Korea. Men's reigning world champion James earned the highest score of the day with a 96-point performance in his third run beating two-time Olympic gold medalist Shaun White, who settled for second, and China's Yui Zhang in third. James also took home the men's Crystal Globe as overall season winner.
Trying to beat a 93.35 per second Olympian.
On the women's side, Kelly Clark's best run of 94-point performance was enough to beat the Chinese pair Jiao Lu and Zitong Kai. But the women's Crystal Globe went to Chloe Kim of the U.S. as overall season winner. And finally, chilly conditions continue in most regions for the rest of tonight, with a low of 2 degrees Celsius in Amman. Tomorrow, a slight rise in temperature is expected, but it remains cold in hilly areas and fair in the Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea, with southeasterly moderate winds. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect relatively warm conditions with northerly moderate winds and slightly high seas. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. His Majesty the King urges full cooperation between the government and the lower house in line with the Constitution to improve economic conditions and alleviate citizens' financial burdens. Haidar al-Abadi announces the start of an offensive in the northern city of Mosul to dislodge Daesh and put an end to the group's ambitions for territorial rule in Iraq. And IDEX, the region's largest defense expo, opens in Abu Dhabi with over 1,200 defense firms from 57 countries taking part. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Ali Atuqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.